In the quiet village of Omuibo, where roosters crowed before dawn and palm trees whispered secrets to the wind, a girl named Adaora was born beneath the glow of a rare red moon. Her birth was considered a sign, at least by the village women who watched the sky that night. Some said she was a gift from the river goddess, others believed she would either bring great fortune or great sorrow. Her mother, Mama Ogochi, was known far and wide, not for riches, but for her hands. She was the village's herbalist, and her touch could soothe fevers, drive out worms, and calm a restless child in the night. But she wasn't just a healer, she was a seer in her own right. Many times, she would look into her calabash bowl of water and speak of things that had not yet happened. Adaora will not stay in this village, she once told Mama Njidika, her best friend. The wind that carried her here is not done traveling. Mama Ogochi raised Adaora with gentleness, but also with strength. She taught her how to read the clouds, sing to the spirits of the earth, and respect the ancestors. Though they lived in a small mud house tucked beneath an aging udala tree, their home overflowed with warmth and sacred laughter. But there was also hardship. Adaora's father had died when she was 3, taken suddenly by a mysterious illness that not even Mama Ogochi could explain. People whispered that someone had sent juju, but no one dared say it aloud. Since then, Mama Ogochi became both mother and father, and though they never had much, Adaora never felt poor. On quiet evenings, mother and daughter would sit by the Teoka River, where Adaora would tell stories to the water. She believed the river was alive, that it listened. She would kneel on the smooth stones, holding her thin, tattered notebook and say, "One day, I wear clothes that shine. I'll speak to many people. I'll leave this place, and I'll return in a car so long, even the village goats will stop and stare." Mama Ogochi would laugh and reply, "Just promise me one thing. When you return, don't forget this river. Or the moon that watched you grow." Adaora always nodded. But life, like rivers, sometimes changes course. When Adaora turned 12, the rhythm of her days changed. Her mother fell ill, not a sharp illness, but a slow, cruel one that drained her strength with each sunrise. Her hands trembled. Her chants weakened. The herbs she once used with such certainty no longer worked. She whispered often in her sleep. One night, she sat up suddenly and said, "I dreamed of a road. A long, black road. And you were walking alone." The village tried. Mama Njidika came with roots. The priestess came with holy water. But nothing worked. On the night of her passing, Mama Ogochi called Adaora close, placing a string of cowries in her hand. "Go to Lagos," she said weakly. "Your Aunt Esther will take you in. It won't be easy. But endure. Endure until your name is loud enough for the spirits to hear." She pressed her daughter's hand. "And never stop speaking to the river. Even when no one listens, the spirits do." That night, Mama Ogochi slipped away, her chest rising once, then stealing like a candle flame in the wind. The village mourned. But Adaora didn't cry. She stared at the sky, her hand gripping the cowries, and whispered to the stars, "I will endure. And I will return." 3 days later, a rusty yellow bus took her away from Omuibo, away from her mother's grave, away from the river that once listened. Adaora didn't know then, but she was not just leaving her home. Lagos was a different world. The city hit Adaora like a slap to the face, loud, smoggy, impatient. It was nothing like the village stories she had heard. There was no golden promise in the air. Just fumes. Shouting. The mechanical roar of downfall swerving through potholes. People didn't walk here, they ran. Hustled. Pushed. And no one had time to greet. Her aunt, Madame Esther, met her at the park in a faded orange gown and with a scowl deep enough to crack concrete. "You are taller than I expected," she said dryly, without a hug. "But thin. I hope you're not sickly." Adaora said nothing. She held tightly to her raffia bag and the cowries hidden inside it. The apartment was deep inside Adaora, one of the city's loudest slums. Cramped buildings stood like old men leaning against each other. Adaora counted 6 people already living in the 2-room flat, her aunt's husband, 4 cousins, and a neighbor's daughter temporarily staying over. She made the 7th. There was no room for her. Literally and figuratively. That very night, she slept on the cold kitchen floor with a rolled-up Ankara wrapper for a pillow. Her feet touched the plastic bucket used for fetching water, and the gas cylinder hissed beside her head. The next morning, before the cocks could crow, if there were any left in the city, Madame Esther handed her a list. Boil water. Sweep. Wash the uniforms. Soak rice. Clean the toilets. After that, get ready for school. School. Adaora's eyes lit up. But that hope flickered quickly when she arrived at Bright Destiny Community School. The building leaned like it wanted to fall. Its walls were covered in faded paint and political posters. The roof leaked when it rained. The benches creaked. The blackboard had holes. The teachers came late and left early. Some came drunk. The students were no better. They mocked Adaora's village accent. Called her bush girl. Laughed when she raised her hand to answer questions. One boy poured chalk dust into her bag. Another tore a page from her only notebook and made a paper plane out of it. But Adaora endured. Each night, she stayed up to read the borrowed books her class teacher once threw away. She lit a small candle stub and hid behind the bathroom door, sounding out words softly like spells. Endure. Endure until the tide turns. And every Friday evening, when her chores were done and the family had eaten, she would walk silently to the far end of the compound and whisper her dreams to a puddle of water that collected in a broken basin. River spirits, can you still hear me here? She didn't know if they could. But she kept whispering. She was walking into fire. It was a scorching Thursday afternoon, the kind where even the flies were too tired to buzz. Adaora stood by the roadside, her small frame barely balanced under the weight of the plastic bowl on her head. Inside were sachets of pure water, sweating and glistening under the sun. She wasn't supposed to be out there, children weren't meant to hawk during school hours, but Madame Esther had other priorities. You think school will feed you? Go and sell those waters before my husband returns. So there she was, under the sun, weaving through honking cars, calling out, pure water, 150. Cold water, 150. Her voice cracked from dryness, but she kept going. Her slippers had worn thin, and the heat from the asphalt was burning through them. Her throat was dry. Her pride, long buried. Then, a silver car pulled up. The window rolled down. Little girl, a firm, graceful voice called. Adaora turned slowly, unsure if she'd heard correctly. A woman stepped out, tall, regal, with dark sunglasses and skin the color of smooth mahogany. Her perfume floated like a gentle warning, this woman was not from around here. She looked like someone from the television, not from Adaora. What's your name? She asked. Adaora, came the timid reply. The woman tilted her head. You speak clearly. Are you in school? Adaora nodded. Yes, Ma. Which one? Bright Destiny, Ma. The woman paused, then knelt slightly so their eyes met. And do you like to read? Adaora nodded again, faster this time. Very much. I like writing too. A small smile tugged at the woman's lips. Good. Come to this address on Saturday. She handed Adaora a card. It's a reading club. For girls like you. Come if you're serious. Adaora took the card like it was gold. The woman bought all the sachets and drove off without waiting for thanks. That night, Adaora kept the card under her pillow, touching it every few minutes to make sure it was real. But when she told Madame Esther, her aunt scoffed. Reading club. Who sends you? Do you think you're special? Finish the dishes first, dreamer. Saturday morning, before the compound awoke, Adaora tiptoed out. She had memorized the address. It took her over an hour to find it, a modest bungalow behind a church with a wooden sign that read, Olumide Foundation for Girls. She was almost too afraid to enter. But something, maybe her mother's spirit, maybe her own hunger for more, pushed her forward. Inside, there were about 15 girls seated on mats, their eyes wide, their hands clutching books. On the wall hung posters of African authors, maps, quotes. And in the center of it all was the woman, Mrs. Olumide. That day changed everything. The reading club became Adaora's haven. Every Saturday, she learned. She read aloud. She wrote short stories on recycled paper. She learned how to use punctuation, how to ask questions, how to tell her truth. One afternoon, Mrs. Olumide stopped her after class. You don't just read. You absorb. Tell me the truth, who teaches you at home? Adaora looked down. No one, Ma. I just remember what my mother said. The woman stared at her a moment longer, then nodded. You go far, Adaora. If the world doesn't break you first. Good things, in Madame Esther's house, were met with suspicion. When Adaora began returning from the reading club with glowing eyes and new words on her lips, her aunt started watching her more closely. She would peek into her small plastic bag after every Saturday visit. One afternoon, she found a children's novel, slightly torn but full of promise. Who gave you this? Is it free? She barked. Yes, Ma. It's from the club. So you think because someone gave you a book, you're now better than us? Madame Esther's eyes flared. Do you even know how many mouths I feed in this house? That evening, Adaora came home to find her small journal, the one where she wrote her stories, ripped to shreds, the pages soaked in the dishwater from the sink. No words. No warning. Just silence and the smell of soap. Her cousins giggled. One of them whispered, You think you'll be Oprah? They laughed again. Later that night, she was locked in the storeroom for forgetting to sweep the compound. She stayed there for 2 days, with only water and a small bowl of beans to eat. No light. No mattress. The air was heavy with the smell of kerosene and rat droppings. But she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to herself, I am the daughter of Ugochi. And Ugochi said I must endure. And something strange happened. In that dark room, she began to dream, not the kind of dreams that leave when you wake, but the kind that make you wake stronger. She dreamed of her mother standing on a mountain, holding a gourd that poured light into Adaora's hands. Behind her, the river flowed upward into the sky. They may break your body, her mother whispered in the dream, but never let them break your voice. When the storeroom door finally opened, Adaora walked out, thinner, but taller in spirit. She told Mrs. Olumide everything. The woman listened in silence, then asked, Do you want to leave that house? Adaora hesitated. If I go now, she'll send me back to the village. I'm not ready yet. I still have work to do. Mrs. Olumide nodded with surprising understanding. Then we'll build a hiding place within the storm. She arranged for Adaora to begin part-time cleaning at her foundation office in exchange for books, warm meals, and quiet time with an old laptop. The office had no generator, but it had peace, and for Adaora, that was enough. It was on that dusty laptop that Adaora discovered something that would change her life forever. Coding. It started with curiosity. Then with late night Googling. Then with hours of watching tutorials. HTML. CSS. JavaScript. None of it made sense at first, but she was used to things not making sense. She simply whispered to the screen as she once whispered to the river. If you teach me, I will not forget. And the screen responded. By the time Adaora turned 16, she had built her first website. A simple landing page for a fictional herbal remedy business she named Ugochi Roots in honor of her mother. It wasn't fancy. The background was muddy green. The buttons barely worked. But it was real. Hers. A thing she'd made with nothing but stubbornness and a cracked laptop screen. Mrs. Olumide wept when she saw it. "You've turned your pain into power," she said. "And you've done it with grace." Word spread quickly. Soon, Adaora was helping the foundation digitize their records. Then building blogs for small businesses in Ajigona, hair salons, church groups, even a funeral home. The money wasn't much, but it was enough to buy her first personal phone. Not a smartphone, just a simple phone with radio and calculator functions. That phone became her lifeline. It was through that phone that she heard the radio announcement one evening. The Future Builders Tech Bootcamp is now accepting applications from Nigerian girls aged 15 to 18. Winners receive full scholarships, mentorship, and a path to global internships. Her hands trembled. She applied that same night, using the foundation's shared computer, her lips muttering prayers with every keystroke. She wrote an essay titled, "The River That Coded Me." In it, she spoke of grief, poverty, and how she whispered to puddles when no one listened. 3 weeks later, she received an email that said, "Congratulations, Adaora. You have been selected." She screamed into her pillow until her throat went dry. But not everyone was happy. Madam Esther found the letter under Adaora's bed and threw it into the dustbin. "You want to fly away now, eh? You want to leave us and forget who fed you Gary when you were nothing?" For the first time, Adaora didn't flinch. She picked the letter from the dustbin, smoothed it out, and said softly, "You fed me Gary." "Yes. But you never gave me love. And I am more than my hunger." Madam Esther slapped her across the face. But Adaora didn't cry. That was the last time she raised her voice at Adaora. Within a month, Adaora left for the boot camp in Abuja, a full 6 weeks of immersive tech training with laptops, mentors, and girls just like her, brilliant, bruised, but burning. There, she discovered confidence. There, she learned to stand up and pitch her ideas. And there, she built a prototype for a mobile app inspired by her mother's herbal traditions, an app that helped users identify local herbs and match them with symptoms using simple voice prompts. The app was called Healing Hands. She didn't know it yet. But that little app would one day change her life. Adaora was no longer just a girl with a dream. She was now a developer, a public speaker, a girl with a name that entered rooms before she did. After the boot camp, Healing Hands was selected for an international tech showcase in Nairobi. It was Adaora's first time on a plane. She stared out the window the entire time, whispering, "Mama, are you watching? I'm flying." Her pitch, delivered in calm, clear English laced with Igbo proverbs, captivated the audience. Not because it was polished, but because it was true. "I built this for my people. For the woman in the market who cannot read, but remembers which leaf cures fever. For the child whose mother has passed, like mine did, and who needs to remember what healing sounds like." She returned to Nigeria with a trophy. But what followed was bigger. International NGOs offered partnerships. Tech hubs offered workspaces. Investors offered seed funding. And for the first time, Adaora was paid, not with rice or words of encouragement, but with actual money. She registered her company under the name Adaverse Innovations, a tribute to both her name and the vastness of her vision. By age 23, she had hired her first staff. By 24, she was on the cover of a Pan-African tech magazine. But even with offices in Lagos and mentorships in Ghana and Canada, something tugged at her spirit. Something unfinished. Unclosed. Then, on a cool morning after a long flight from Johannesburg, she stood before her window and whispered, "It's time." She didn't tell anyone, except her team videographer and Mrs. Olimide. She wanted the moment captured, not just for herself, but for every girl still sweeping floors in silence. They rented 3 black SUVs with tinted windows. One carried books. Another carried food supplies. The last carried her. As they approached Omuibo, children ran behind the convoy, barefoot and wide-eyed. The drums started even before she stepped out. Adaora has returned. The daughter of Ugochi has come home. Her old classmates were now farmers, mothers, traders. Her former teacher stood with tears in her eyes. Even Mama Njidika, now stooped with age, danced barefoot in the dust. Adaora stepped out of the SUV slowly, wrapped in a golden ISI egu fabric with her mother's cowries stitched into the neckline. Her head tie stood high, her eyes soft. She greeted the elders, bowed to the children, and walked slowly to the riverbank. There, where her journey began, she knelt and poured water from a silver flask into the stream. I told you I would return. I have kept my promise. The river sparkled in response, as if the spirits themselves whispered welcome. Dawn came quietly to Omuibo. It was the morning after the celebration, the night when the entire village sang until the stars burned brighter. But this day was different. It wasn't for dancing. It was for memory. Before the cock crowed, Adaora left the house in silence, her feet bare, the hem of her wrapper brushing the cool earth. She walked with only one companion, Mama Njidika, her mother's closest friend, now almost 80. Bent but strong. They said nothing as they made their way along the narrow path overgrown with grass and wild lemongrass. The path that led to a place only Adaora had longed to return to. The grave. There was no tombstone. Just a low mound beneath an almond tree and a small, warm clay pot placed on top, refreshed yearly by Mama Njidika. Adaora knelt beside it and placed her hand on the mound. She did not cry. Instead, she began to sing. It was Mama Ugochi's song, the one with no words, just a hum that rose and fell like the wind on the river. A sacred song. A bridge between the world that is seen and the one that watches from behind the veil. She poured palm oil, honey, and a handful of herbs into a wooden bowl. Then she added a torn page from her childhood notebook, one she had found years later in the trash, half intact. Mama, she whispered, I returned, not with tears, but with answers. I remember everything. Even the things you never said out loud. Mama Njidika stepped forward, sprinkled river water on the grave, and said, Your mother walks among the stars now. But today, she kneels with us. Then Adaora stood. From her handbag, she brought out a rolled scroll, official land documents. She handed them to Mama Njidika. I'm building a school. Right here, in Omuibo. For every child who thinks their dreams are too far away. I will name it Ugochi Academy. Mama Njidika placed a wrinkled hand on her cheek. You are not just her daughter. You are her continuation. Construction began a month later. Ugochi Academy would become the first solar-powered school in the region, with a library that included African folklore, digital labs, and a wellness center that combined modern healthcare with indigenous knowledge. At the gate stood a bronze statue of Mama Ugochi, one hand holding a leaf, the other holding a lantern. At her feet, a little girl knelt, her eyes lifted, her mouth open in a song. The plaque beneath read, She healed with leaves. Her daughter healed with light. 2 years after the school opened, Ugochi Academy was at full capacity. Children in crisp uniforms walked to class each morning with joy instead of fear. Some came from faraway towns, carried in small buses donated by Adaora's Tech Foundation. Others walked barefoot, as Adaora once had, holding books close to their chests like sacred scrolls. The library was filled with stories, some written by famous African authors, others by the students themselves. And on the walls hung photographs of Adaora, not just in her golden wrapper, but also as a girl in a torn uniform, reminding the students of what was possible. The tech lab bore the quote, "There is wisdom in our roots, and power in our future." One child, Masoma, had never seen a computer until she enrolled. Within a year, she was building basic apps and writing essays about climate justice. Adaora saw herself in her, the same fire, the same questions, the same way of whispering when no one seemed to listen. Every few months, Adaora returned, not just to the school, but to the river. She would kneel, whisper, and sometimes cry, not from sadness, but from a kind of reverence only those who have suffered and survived understand. Meanwhile, Adaora's innovations had become a global platform. Adaora's app, Healing Hands, had expanded into 6 African languages and had helped over 500,000 users access health education and herbal wisdom. She was invited to speak at the United Nations. She shared stages with CEOs and presidents. But when asked where she found her strength, her answer never changed. From a river that listened. From a mother who knew. From pain that refused to be wasted. She created a literacy scholarship fund named the Esther Fund, not out of bitterness, but to break the chain of neglect in homes like the one she once lived in. Madame Esther never asked for forgiveness, but one day, a parcel arrived at her home. Inside were a framed photo of Adaora, a check for her grandchildren's school fees, and a note that read, "This is not payment. It is closure." The old woman wept quietly for hours. On Adaora's 30th birthday, she sat with a group of girls at the base of the Udala tree. One girl asked, "Auntie Adaora, did you always know you would be great?" Adaora laughed gently. "No. I just knew I couldn't stay small forever." Another asked, "Did the spirits really hear you?" She smiled. "Not only did they hear me, they followed me." And then she did something unexpected. She pulled out her old cowries, the same ones her mother gave her, and handed one to each girl. "Keep this," she said. "When the world forgets you, whisper to it. When you succeed, whisper again. The river always remembers its daughters."